Donald Trump and Karoline Leavitt do not care. As much as they go in front of cameras and whine and scream and yell, they do not care about rising political violence in this country that they are responsible for and the epidemic of gun violence in this country, a policy failure that they refuse to act on. They just don't care. All they want to do is exploit for political gain these tragedies as much as possible. But they can't do that when they are responsible. And that is what Karoline Leavitt had to reckon with this morning as she melted down as it became clear that 2 gunmen yesterday were Trump supporters. Their beliefs have been exposed and she is freaking out. We're going to get into it all in her meltdown on Fox. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video. And if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we can get into the meltdown that Karoline Leavitt had after we check out the new information about these 2 gunmen, I want to start with the disgusting rhetoric that Karoline Leavitt is pushing that is leading to these attacks.
These groups have radicalized impressionable individuals to foment violence. An attempted transgender assassin traveled to Justice Brett Kavanaugh's family home with plans to end his life. An attempted assassin came within an inch of ending President Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania, and on the campaign trail, another attempted assassin tried to kill the president at his golf club in Florida. A left-wing assassin shot United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson right in the back in the heart of New York City. ICE agents are facing a more than 1,000% increase in assaults for simply doing their jobs. Violent radical left-wing mobs engaged in illegal behavior, targeted Jewish Americans, and shut down America's college campuses under the previous administration. Left-wing mobs burned down Tesla dealerships out of, quote, protest of Elon Musk and his policies. In May, a left-wing activist shouting "Free Palestine" murdered 2 innocent Israeli embassy staffers outside of the D.C. Jewish Museum here in Washington. These are just a few examples, prominent examples of the growing left-wing political violence in our country. Enough is enough, and as President Trump has promised, he will directly address the dark sources funding and supporting this domestic terrorism to finally restore order in our country.
The fault for these violent acts rests squarely on the shoulders of Donald Trump and all of those who push his vile and disgusting talking points in his administration. I'm tired of acting like that is not the case. Donald Trump has had more political power than any person in this country for the past decade, as we have seen shooting after shooting after shooting, as we've seen a rise of political violence. Does he tone down the rhetoric? No. Does he take any meaningful steps to make sure that we end the epidemic of gun violence in America? No. And so I refuse to allow us to have a conversation that does not squarely blame Donald Trump because it is his fault. It is. And if Joe Biden was still president, do you think Republicans wouldn't be blaming him? So let's stop doing this, oh, well, we have to be nice in our politics. No, get down in the fucking muck and start acting like the truth is the truth, because it is. It's not going to hurt you. It's going to expose people just how disgusting this Republican Party is. And that was very clear when we saw just how connected these 2 gunmen yesterday were to Donald Trump. And then we're going to get into Karoline Leavitt's response. Mormon church shooter had a Trump sign outside his house. The Mormon church shooter who killed at least 4 people in an attack on Sunday had a Trump sign outside his house and wore MAGA merch. Public records confirm that Thomas Jacob Sanford lived at the residence with the Trump sign, which was a 15-minute drive away from the church, where he opened fire on hundreds of the congregation, killing at least 4 and wounding 8 others. Authorities said Sanford rammed into the church's front door with his pickup truck before he started shooting and later set the building on fire. He was killed in a gunfight with 2 officers within 10 minutes. You see right here the assailant wearing a Trump shirt. You can also see the Trump sign above a stop sign at his house. But this was not the only gunman we saw yesterday. A Texas man was arrested for threatening to shoot up a pride parade as payback for Charlie Kirk. Payback for Charlie Kirk. That is what Donald Trump has incited by saying that the left is thugs and that we're animals and that we need to be stopped, we need to be taken care of, using the most vile and disgusting rhetoric, not to lower the tensions in this country, but to bring them up for his gain. Donald Trump is putting more people in danger, but he doesn't care. Now, what I was most interested in yesterday was, where were the tweets from Kash Patel? Where was the "we found these bullet casings"? This is the political ideology, because J.D. Vance and Kash Patel and Christine Noem always jump to that when they can frame someone as some left-wing ideologue. But not with this guy. Very interesting, and especially interesting what Karoline Leavitt said here.
And they are trying to understand more about this, how premeditated it was, how much planning went into it, whether he left a note. All of those questions have yet to be answered, but certainly will be answered by the FBI. I think the American people in your audience can be assured. Look at the great work that the FBI did in light of, or in the hours and days following the assassination attempt, or assassination, I'm sorry, on Charlie Kirk's life. That was a successful investigation, and that investigation continues. And that assassin was, of course, being held accountable in the court of law now.
Oh, whoa. Time out. So the FBI is looking into it? Karoline, look no further. Media outlets confirmed this guy had a Trump sign. He was wearing the Trump merch. He loves MAGA. Can you not? You can't track down that information? You had those bullet casings that Kash Patel wanted to post to Twitter with anti-ICE, something no one has ever said before. Fuck ICE, by the way, scribbled onto these bullet casings, and you immediately had to post that. It was within like 10 minutes. But there's a Trump sign, and he's wearing MAGA merch, and we say nothing? Nothing at all? Karoline, why is that? You seem like such an honest person. They're looking into it. We're going to get more details. We couldn't possibly know the reason. Donald Trump only cares about these shootings. Donald Trump only cares about political violence in America when he can frame it for his benefit. Period, end, full stop. That is it. These people do not actually care about keeping you safe. I refuse to engage in this conversation where we want to come to a place of reason or common sense, and we got to reach across the aisle. These people don't want to do that, right? They're not legitimate actors. They don't care. They're not operating in good faith. So let's stop pretending that if we meet somewhere in the middle, it's going to be helpful, because we're standing right here on the side of maybe gun violence doesn't need to happen in America. They're on this side, which is we're bankrolled by billionaires. And if we meet in the middle, it's going to look like, I'm going to stay here, and then we're going to keep moving over until we're on their side. Because that's where we are right now. If we want to appease conservatives, if we want to appease the MAGA crowd, we're going to keep losing elections. Let's be real. If we try to, bend to the right, and maybe Trump did this right, and maybe we like this conservative policy on the border. I fucking don't. They don't actually have any interest in border policy. They don't have any actual interest in fighting crime in a real way. It is political exploitation of tragedy. That is what they want. They're not trying to fix anything. They want it broken. It's the way they win. And so if we try to play into that game, we won't win, and more shit will be broken. That's the place we're in right now. So I'm so tired of it, especially when they make it so obvious how unseriously they take us and how willing they are to attack us. Just listen to this conversation between Jake Tapper and Mike Johnson yesterday.
Just looking at the principle at stake here, if you can remove Comey and Trump out of the equation, as a constitutional attorney and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, do you believe it's acceptable for any president to publicly or privately instruct their attorney general to prosecute a political opponent and go as far as firing a U.S. attorney if they don't bring charges because they don't think the case is strong enough?
I'm glad you brought up the principle. That is exactly what's at issue here. James Comey lied to Congress. Okay, he took an oath. He said things to Congress that were simply not true. It's called perjury. A grand jury that is not, a nonpartisan, non-biased grand jury that was assembled looked at the charges, and they agreed, they voted to bring an indictment of James Comey. Not President Trump, not the DOJ, but a grand jury. That's how our system works. It's a very important principle for us to apply, that everybody has to subscribe to the law, even a former FBI director. And he has lots to answer for. There are many things that he could have been indicted for, but the statute of limitations ran out on so many of those matters. Not here. Perjury is important. You can't, especially if you're a high official, appointed or elected official, you cannot raise your hand, take an oath, and lie to Congress. And that's an important principle, Jake, for us to advance.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but you didn't answer the part about President Trump putting it all out there for everyone to see on Truth Social after pushing out the U.S. attorney, this conservative Eric Siebert. He wrote to Pam Bondi, the attorney general, nothing's being done about Comey, Schiff, and Letitia James, even though they're all, quote, guilty as hell. The president demanded justice must be served now. He mentioned Lindsay Halligan, who is now the acting U.S. attorney. And Bondi clearly got the message. She appointed Halligan U.S. attorney, despite the fact she has no prosecutorial experience. A few days later, Halligan indicted Comey. I mean, this looks like it was directed by the president. As you know, indictments are not convictions. Indictments have to do with a grand jury saying whether or not a case can be brought. It's not a finding of guilt. The defense isn't even allowed to present a case there. Don't you have any qualms about any president telling an attorney general, go after these three political opponents?
I would take issue with that. I don't think that's what he did. But what I have qualms with, Jake, is the total and utter weaponization of the Department of Justice. And Comey was a primary person responsible for that. They quite literally, for 4 years under the Biden administration, turned the entire apparatus of our judicial system against one person. His name's Donald Trump. There's never been a political figure in the history of the world who was so maligned and attacked, certainly not using the legal system of his country to go after him in the way that they did. Every way possible. You and I would need 3 hours of a program to go through all the ways that they did that. They weaponized the DOJ. And so that's what Comey ultimately was the leader of and responsible for. He was one of the primary persons who did that. And I think if he lied to Congress about what he knew and when he knew it, then that is a matter that transcends politics. I think he has to be tried for that. And I expect that the jury in that case will determine that that's exactly what he did.
They are sending the Justice Department after their political enemies and saying it's Joe Biden's fault because his son was prosecuted and convicted. Are we seriously going to take these people at their word on anything? Because I say no. Let's stop playing into the game where we trust everyone. And Chuck Schumer said it yesterday. I'm going to trust the Republicans to do the right thing on this budget vote. I'm going to trust them not to take away people's health care. Why? What have you seen that gives you any reason to trust them? Why are we trusting them? Why are we admitting that? Why are we giving up anything? We should hold all our ground as long as possible, as hard as possible, as tough as possible. Get into the muck. Start slinging shit. Call them out. I'm certainly going to on this show, and if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And if you want to support the show in another way, you can subscribe to my Substack, becoming a free or paid subscriber. One of the best ways to support the show that is linked right here or down below. Keep on fighting. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.